"She's not just our housekeeper," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "She's the woman who brought laughter back into my daughter's life, who made this house feel like home again, who taught me that love doesn't end with loss, it just changes shape. In a world bound by appearances and old expectations, one broken family dared to heal, not with grand gestures but with paper cranes, one fold at a time. This is a story about grief, resilience, and the quiet power of second chances, of children who believe in magic, and grown-ups who learn to believe again. It's about how the simplest things, cookies stargazing a folded piece of paper, can change a heart, and maybe even a life. So if you believe in love that defies expectations, in families made by choice, and in the beauty of healing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories. Because this is a journey you won't want to miss. Let's begin. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. If this story moves you, consider liking and subscribing. Now take a deep breath. Here's the beginning. Ethan's electric car slid quietly through the entrance of his hilltop estate in Westbridge. The golden light of early evening spilled across the stone driveway, painting the quiet landscape in long, soft shadows. After 4 relentless days of boardroom battles in Chicago, Ethan's body ached beneath his dark navy suit, but it wasn't fatigue that tightened his chest. It was the thought of returning to a house that hadn't felt like home in nearly 3 years. Ever since Mia's funeral, silence had been his most loyal companion. He stepped through the front door expecting the usual, the gentle buzz of the air system, the echo of polished floors, the absence of laughter. But today, something stopped him. A sound, high-pitched, light-alive laughter. It caught him off guard, not the mechanical kind that people force at dinner parties. This was warm and unfiltered, like wind chimes catching the breeze. He moved toward the glass corridor. That's when he saw them. By the edge of the infinity pool, his daughter, Clara. Now 8 was splashing in the water curls, damp eyes bright. Her laughter bounced off the walls like sunlight through glass. Beside her, sitting cross-legged on the warm stone, was a woman, feet in the pool, simple linen dress. Her name was Jade Morgan, the new housekeeper he'd hired last month. But she wasn't just watching Clara. She was in the moment, present, laughing with her matching. Every splash with ripples of joy. Miss Jade. "Do the big one again," Clara called out, squealing. "You sure it's a monster wave?" Jade teased, lifting her legs. "Ready? Here it comes." Clara shrieked as water surged toward her, then collapsed into giggles. Watching them, something inside. Ethan shifted. A wall he didn't even know he'd built, cracked just a little. "Dad." Clara spotted him, her face lighting up like it hadn't in months. She clambered out of the water arms, wide feet slapping wet footprints across the stone. Ethan hesitated, then let instinct take over. He dropped to one knee. Suit be damned. She crashed into his arms, wrapping around him like warmth he didn't know he missed. She smelled of chlorine and the vanilla shampoo Mia once picked out for her. His throat closed. He held her tighter. From behind a voice called gently, "Mr. Langston." "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you'd be home so early." Jade stood brushing droplets from her dress, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and concern. "I should have had Clara inside before 5. We were only meant to read by the pool." Ethan looked at her, then at Clara, still beaming. Something about the light, the smell of sugar cookies drifting faintly from the kitchen, the drawings taped to the sliding doors. It all felt different. Not tidy, not perfect, but real. "It's all right," he said quietly. "Actually, it's nice." Jade's eyes flickered. Gratitude maybe, or guilt. Clara bounced beside them. "We baked too, Dad. Real cookies, not the boxed kind. Miss Jade let me stir everything." Ethan's mouth quirked, half amusement, half awe. This wasn't the house he left 4 days ago. Something or someone had breathed life into it again. And though he didn't know how or why he felt it, the silence had finally broken. Jade stood abruptly startled, her cheeks flushed as if caught in the middle of something forbidden. "I didn't expect you home until much later," she said quickly, reaching for a towel. "I should have had Clara showered and dressed before dinner." She glanced at the puddles on the floor, the soft, wet footprints trailing behind Clara's sweetheart. "You're soaking your dad." Ethan should have been annoyed. Rules had always been clear in this house. No unsupervised swimming, no outdoor play after 4 in the afternoon. No deviations from Clara's carefully designed routine. His whole world ran like a clock investment, calls, violin lessons. Even mealtimes were optimized. But as he looked at his daughter, cheeks pink from the sun, her smile brighter than anything in this house had seen in years, he didn't say what he usually would. Instead, he heard himself say, "It's all right. Actually, it's kind of wonderful." Jade paused, towel half wrapped around Clara, surprise flickering across her features. Relief followed, but also something else, something that looked a little like guilt. "We made cookies, too," Clara piped up proudly, still bouncing on her toes. "Real ones. From flour and eggs and everything. Miss Jade taught me how to use the scale and the measuring cups." She looked up at Jade before adding, "Can we show him?" Ethan noticed the way Clara turned to Jade for permission as naturally as she once turned to Mia. "They should be cool by now," Jade said softly, then hesitated. "Unless you'd rather keep to Clara's dinner plan. Mr. Langston." He looked at Clara, then back at her. The sun caught Jade's profile, gentle, grounded, warm. There was nothing calculated about her. She wasn't precise. The way Mia had been, wasn't polished to perfection. No, she was something else entirely, something that made the house feel less like a museum and more like a heartbeat. "I think we can bend the rules," he said, his voice low. Led the way. Clara. As they walked in, he began to notice things, small, quiet changes. A glass vase on the table, holding wildflowers from the hill behind the house. A faint aroma of cinnamon and something sweet curling from the kitchen drawings taped to the glass doors, asteroids, animals, and something that looked suspiciously like a flying whale. Mia would have hated the mess. Ethan didn't. In the kitchen, Clara stood proudly beside a plate of cookies, lopsided but golden, the smell rich and nostalgic. She chatted excitedly, pointing out which ones she shaped herself. Ethan didn't catch every word, he was too busy watching Jade. She moved around the space like she'd always belonged to it. Quiet, competent, graceful in a way that had nothing to do with appearance. She didn't just follow the house's rhythm, she had changed it. "Would you like some coffee with your cookie?" "Mr. Langston?" she asked, already reaching for the cup he liked best. A deep blue mug Clara had given him last December, still rarely used. He opened his mouth and surprised even himself. "Call me Ethan." Their eyes met over Clara's head. Just for a moment, a flicker, a current. Jade's smile faltered, not from fear, but from something quieter, harder to name. She looked away. "Ethan," she repeated almost like a question, and turned toward the machine. He watched the curve of her back as she moved, the calm certainty of her hands. There was something behind that quiet, a story. One she hadn't told yet, but it was there in the way she reached for the sugar before he asked. In how Clara looked at her, trusted her. In how the whole house suddenly felt less like grief and more like breath. Outside, the day faded to gold. Inside, something else stirred, soft, unsure but real. A part of him, long sealed off, was beginning to warm. The walls Ethan had spent years building around his life since Mia's passing. They didn't feel so necessary anymore. And somehow that realization, tender and terrifying, might have been the most dangerous thing of all. He watched from across the kitchen as Jade leaned over the counter with Clara. Their heads nearly touched as they arranged cookies on a plate, like it was fine art. Clara offered loud opinions about symmetry, while Jade nodded with mock seriousness. Ethan knew the rule book. She was an employee. Boundaries were meant to be firm, and he'd learned the cost of ignoring that line before. But watching them like this, his daughter laughing again, his house no longer echoing with absence, he began to wonder, maybe some rules were worth rewriting. What he didn't know, couldn't know, was that Jade was keeping something from him. A truth that didn't belong in this fragile moment. As she turned and handed him his coffee, their fingers brushed, brief. Barely a touch, but enough to make her breath hitch. She blinked hard, pushing guilt back into the dark corners of her chest. Not now, she told herself. Not when it was finally starting to feel peaceful. Let this morning be enough. The next day, golden light poured through the tall kitchen windows, scattering rainbow flecks across the marble counters. The house was quiet, save for the soft sound of a knife meeting fruit. Jade stood at the kitchen island slicing fresh strawberries with practiced focus. Her phone sat heavy in her apron pocket. 3 missed calls. She already knew what they meant. Her mother had tried again. Miles had asked for her. The sound of polished shoes against wood broke her thoughts. Ethan entered the room, his presence immediate. Today, he wore charcoal gray cut clean and sharp, still every bit the man who closed multi-million-dollar deals before breakfast. But something had softened. She saw it in his eyes. "Good morning, mister." She caught herself glancing up. "Ethan, coffee's ready. I made it stronger. You usually prefer it that way on Wednesdays." He stopped mid-reach. "You notice that I notice things," she said, simply turning back to the fruit. Easier than meeting his eyes. Easier than admitting how much of his rhythm she'd quietly memorized. How he always loosened his tie exactly 2 notches before reading bedtime stories. How his hand always found his wedding band when stress crept in. How his smile tried to hide in the corners of his mouth when Clara said something clever. "Dad." Clara bounded into the kitchen, uniform, neat backpack, swinging Miss Jade's, teaching me French today. Ethan raised an eyebrow. French. Just breakfast words, Jade said, sliding a plate in front of Clara. Toast in the shape of hearts, dusted lightly with sugar. I thought it might make mornings a little more fun. She picks up languages fast. Les phrases. Clara declared proudly, pointing to the strawberries s'il vous plaît. Ethan smiled. A real one. The kind that warmed all the way to his eyes. Sophia would have liked that, he said quietly, then paused as if surprised the words had slipped out. The air shifted. Grief returned like a shadow. Not loud, just there. Jade turned away, wiping the counter with slow, thoughtful movements. She had learned to read these silences, learned when to offer space and when to simply remain. It was a dance now, this quiet understanding, the rhythm of a family still learning how to heal. "Miss Jade makes everything fun," Clara announced between bites, completely unaware of the delicate silence that had filled the kitchen. Just moments before, yesterday, she taught me how to fold paper cranes. She continued, proudly lifting one from her backpack. "If you make 1,000, you get to make a wish." Did you know that Ethan glanced at the clock on the wall? "That's quite the goal," he said, adjusting his sleeve. "Though maybe we save the origami for after school hours." Jade hesitated, then spoke gently. "Actually, I thought it might help her with math. Folding involves patterns, counting symmetry. We've been grouping them by tens." He looked at her for a moment longer than he intended. She could feel it. That flicker of self-doubt sparked inside her again. She was only the housekeeper. Who was she to suggest anything about Clara's education? But then, Ethan nodded slowly. Her last math quiz did go better. Turning to Clara, he asked, "So how many have you made so far?" 30, she beamed. "That's 3 groups of 10. We're keeping them in the shiny box Mommy gave me. Miss Jade says it's okay to keep special things from Mommy close, But we can add new special things too. Jade held her breath. Maybe that was too much. She hadn't meant to step into sacred space. The lacquered box had sat untouched for so long, a relic Clara once guarded like a museum piece. It had taken weeks to gently suggest that it might be meant for living memories too. Ethan's face was unreadable. Then he looked at her, not sharply, not distantly, but with something raw in his eyes. "Thank you," he said low, and just like that, her chest tightened. If he only knew the truth, why she understood so deeply how hard it was to carry grief and still try to grow something new. Her phone, still heavy in her pocket, buzzed again. She didn't check it. "The car will be here in 10 minutes, Ethan said, turning to Clara. "Better. Finish your strawberries, kiddo." As Clara ate, Ethan didn't move. He sipped his coffee slowly, really watching as Jade helped Clara review French words, tucked a small handwritten note into her lunchbox, then carefully adjusted the collar of her uniform. "You're good with her," he said at last, just loud enough for Jade to hear, just quiet enough for Clara not to. "She makes it easy," Jade answered, though the words trembled in her throat. Was she like this with Miles when he was little? The memories were beginning to blur at the edges, and that scared her more than she could admit. Parenting's never easy. Ethan murmured, a quiet thread of knowing in his voice. "Trust me." Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The space between them softened. Jade broke it first, lifting Clara's plate with a practiced ease. "Your calendar says there's a dinner meeting tonight," she said, shifting back into the role she knew best. "Should I keep Clara busy until 8? Ethan set down his cup. "I was thinking of canceling. The investors can wait. It's been too long since I've had dinner with my daughter." Before Jade could respond, Clara jumped in, eyes lighting up. "Can Miss Jade eat with us?" Jade opened her mouth to politely decline. Dinner was family time, and she wasn't family. Or was she? Before Jade could offer a polite refusal, Ethan spoke. "You're welcome to join us," he said. His tone casual, but his eyes, they lingered on hers, full of something quieter, something that asked her not just to stay for dinner, but to stay present. She opened her mouth to decline. She had calls to return, a message from her mother, a toddler, 2 states away, who had asked for her 3 nights in a row. A blanket back home, tiny and pale blue, that still smelled faintly of baby powder, the one she cried into more often than she'd ever admit. "That's kind of you," she said quietly. "But I should probably. Please." The interruption didn't come from Ethan, but from Clara. Her eyes were wide, hopeful. "You can teach Dad French too." She grinned. Jade looked at them both, this guarded man in an open-collared shirt and his daughter with curls still slightly damp from swimming, and felt something inside her soften. One evening. Just one, pretending for a few hours that she belonged here, that this warmth could somehow include her. She whispered. Decoured. Clara squealed, clapping her hands. Ethan smiled, and Jade felt her last line of resistance dissolve. As the two of them headed toward the car, Clara talking excitedly about showing her paper cranes to her friends, Ethan turned once, just once, to look back at Jade. She smiled, just a small one, and for that fleeting moment it felt almost real. Then her phone buzzed again, the empty kitchen wrapped around her as she stared down at the screen. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood among the quiet signs of a life not hers. Crumbs on the counter, coloring pages on the fridge, a mug still warm from coffee, and allowed herself to cry. Not loudly, just a few tears. Quick, efficient. Then she wiped them away. There was still work to do, and if that meant bringing joy to another child while her own fell asleep, hearing her voice through a phone screen, then so be it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Ethan had returned for his briefcase and stood frozen in the hallway. He saw her back turned, brushing tears from her face. He watched her pull herself upright, breathe in deep, and place her expression back into calmness, into quiet purpose. And for the first time, he wondered if maybe he wasn't the only one in this house carrying more than he let on. Dinner had gone perfectly, too perfectly. Later, as Jade loaded dishes into the washer, the kitchen seemed to glow in soft amber. The under-cabinet lights cast warm halos on the tile, and the storm outside whispered against the glass like a memory trying to find its voice. She replayed it all in her mind. Clara's laughter as they stumbled through French phrases, Ethan's quiet surprise at her chicken pot pie, the way their fingers had brushed over the salt. "You don't have to do that," Ethan said gently from behind her. Jade turned. He had taken off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. He looked impossibly at ease, and that made her more uneasy than ever. "You're our guest tonight, remember?" She gave him a soft smile. Force of habit. "Clara's asleep," she added. "I think the French wore her out." Ethan leaned against the counter, gaze distant. "I haven't seen her that excited about learning in a long time." He didn't say Mia's name. He didn't have to. Jade didn't fill the silence. She just wiped her hands and stood still. "You have a gift with her," he said finally. The words landed like a stone in her chest. "I just understand, kids," she replied softly. Her thoughts flicked to Miles, his laugh, his questions, his bedtime songs. Tonight had reminded her of everything she missed. Thunder rumbled outside and raindrops began tapping gently on the windows. Ethan reached into a nearby cabinet and pulled out a bottle of red wine. "Stay for a glass?" he asked. "The storm's getting worse, and honestly, I'd like the company." Everything in Jade warned her that this was a bad idea. The low light, the wine, the quiet hum of the storm outside, but Ethan's gaze wasn't demanding, it was steady. "Curious kind, one glass," she said. He poured 2 generous servings from a bottle she knew cost more than her month's rent. When he handed her a glass, their fingers touched again. That same quiet current ran through her. "To new traditions," he said, lifting his glass. "To new traditions," she echoed. The wine was deep-textured, just like everything in Ethan's world, measured, curated, yet full of hidden layers. He swirled his glass, thoughtful. "I've been meaning to ask, where did you learn to cook like that? Your references mentioned training, but this feels different." He gestured loosely to the kitchen, still carrying traces of their earlier dinner warmth in the air, laughter in the corners. "My grandmother Jade answered. A safe memory. She raised me and my siblings after our parents." She trailed off, unsure whether to keep going. Ethan waited. "Died. Car crash. I was 8. He didn't speak. Just listened. She worked 3 jobs. Jade went on, her voice softening. But she still cooked for us every night, said food was love made visible." Ethan's expression shifted. "She sounds extraordinary." She was... Jade sipped her wine again, letting it settle the ache in her chest. "She taught me that family isn't about having the perfect life. It's about taking what's broken and making something beautiful out of it." The words hung there quiet but full. Ethan set down his glass, took a step closer. "Is that what you're doing here?" he asked, his voice low. "Making something beautiful." She blinked. The question startled her. "I'm just doing my job." But they both knew that wasn't true. "Are you?" he asked again. "Because what I see is someone bringing this house back to life. Someone showing my daughter that joy doesn't mean forgetting, that it's okay to smile again." Her hands trembled. She set the glass down carefully. "Ethan." "Jade," he said gently. "I think you're giving me too much credit, and I think," he said, "you're not giving yourself enough." Thunder rolled again, louder now. The lights flickered once, twice, then faded into darkness. Jade let out a small gasp, instinctively reaching forward. Her hand landed on his chest, warm and solid. "Stay still," he whispered. "The generator will kick in." But in the quiet dark, something shifted. She could hear his breath, feel the space between them, narrow. His hand found her waist to steady her, and the air between them sparked like a match waiting to be lit. Then the soft hum of emergency lights returned pale blue, casting the kitchen in a gentle glow. Neither of them moved. "Jade," he said, and the way he spoke her name made her knees unsteady. His hand remained on her waist, fingertips just barely pressing. "We shouldn't," she whispered, but her face had tilted toward his. Why not? 1,000 reasons swirled through her mind. Because he was her boss, because this was his world, not hers, because there were things he didn't know, things that could destroy everything. Because of Miles, her phone buzzed, a name lit up the screen, her mother. Reality hit like cold water. She stepped back. "I should check on Clara," she said quickly. Make sure the storm didn't wake her. Ethan didn't stop her. But she could feel the weight of his eyes following her as she slipped from the kitchen carrying a storm of her own. Out in the hallway, Jade leaned against the cool wall, her breath uneven. Her phone vibrated again, urgent, unrelenting. With trembling fingers, she answered. "Mom, Jade, sweetheart." Her mother's voice was taut with worry. "Miles has a fever. The doctor says it's just an ear infection, but he's been crying for you all night." The floor beneath her seemed to shift. She could hear movement in the kitchen behind her, Ethan probably rinsing the wine glasses, unaware that her world was cracking again. In her pocket, her most recent paycheck sat folded enough to pay for antibiotics, but little more. "I'll send the money," she said, steadying her voice. "For the prescription." "Baby," her mother whispered, "he needs more than that. He needs—" "I have to go." Jade cut in her throat thick. "I'll call tomorrow." She hung up, just as Ethan stepped into the hallway. "Clara's still asleep," he said. Then he paused, catching the look on her face. "Jade." "What is it?" "Nothing," she replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Just messages I should head to my room before the rain picks up again." He looked like he wanted to say more, maybe return to that moment they'd almost shared, but something in the way she held herself must have warned him. Of course he said, "Thank you for dinner," and everything else. She nodded without speaking, then turned away. Every step toward the garage apartment felt like a small betrayal of something unspoken. Behind her, she heard him sigh, not out of frustration, but something far more human. Something like longing. Later, curled up on her narrow bed, Jade listened to the storm lash the windows. She opened her photo gallery. Miles looked up at her, round face, bright eyes, the kind of trust that only a child could give. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered, brushing her thumb over the screen. "All of this? It's for you." But as thunder cracked and the wind howled outside, she wondered how much longer she could keep her two lives from colliding. From her window, she could see the light still on in Ethan's study. The house across the driveway felt both impossibly far and heartbreakingly close. Something had to give, and when it did, she just hoped she would still be standing. 3 days later, the mansion had slipped back into routine. At least on the surface, Ethan found himself lingering at breakfast longer than usual, choosing to work from the sunroom, his eyes drifting toward Jade more often than they should. She in turn kept her distance, always finding ways to stay near Clara, like the child was a gentle buffer neither of them dared cross. But that morning, everything shifted. Daddy Clara said between bites of toast, "Can Miss Jade come to my career day?" Jade froze mid-wipe, a cloth still in her hand. "Career day?" Ethan asked, lowering his coffee cup. "Everyone's supposed to bring someone they want to be like when they grow up. What about me?" Ethan asked lightly. "I thought you wanted to be a businesswoman like your old man." Clara shook her head, curls bouncing. "I want to be like Miss Jade. She makes people happy. She knows how to fix things, and her cookies are the best ever." Jade turned, voice trembling just a little. "Clara, sweetheart, your dad would be much better for something like that. He's successful, important. but I want you. Clara insisted. You promised you'd always be here, and career day is important. Silence fell like a curtain, and in that stillness, Ethan watched as the color drained from Jade's face, like a truth she couldn't hold back was rising fast and unforgiving. Sweetheart, Jade said at last, her voice catching. I never meant to. I shouldn't have promised that. But you did, Clara said, her tone quiet, but unwavering. When the thunder scared me, you pinky swore you'd always be here. Ethan watched as something shifted in Jade's face. A crack, sudden and raw, split through her expression, and before either of them could stop her, she turned and rushed out of the room. Clara looked down at her plate, shoulders slumped. Did I do something wrong? No, Princess Ethan said, rising and straightening his tie. Stay here and finish your breakfast. I'll talk to Miss Jade. He found her outside, hands gripping the edge of the stone fountain in the garden, her shoulders trembling. Morning sunlight caught the tears on her cheeks, turning them to diamonds. Jade, he said gently. I'm sorry. She didn't look up, Mr. Langston. I crossed a line. I made Clara a promise I had no right to make. I know that's not professional. I'll pack my things. Stop. His voice was calm, but steady. Look at me. She turned slowly, and the pain in her eyes hit him like a wave. She looked like someone carrying the weight of a storm no one else could see. You've brought more light into this house in a few months than we've had in years, he said. Clara adores you. And He paused, choosing his words. I've come to count on you too. You don't understand, she whispered. I can't stay. I shouldn't even be here. Then help me understand, he said. Stepping closer, I see it every time you get a call. Every time Clara hugs you like she's anchoring you to the ground. What are you running from? For a breathless moment he thought she might tell him. Her lips parted. Her eyes flicked across his face like searching for permission. Then her phone rang. The sound shattered the stillness. She stepped back, blinking hard. I should check on Clara Jade, wait. But she was already gone, leaving him alone beside the quiet fountain, the scent of her vanilla perfume lingering in the air like memory. The rest of the morning passed in a fog. Ethan canceled his meetings, distracted by every detail, how Jade's hands trembled as she helped Clara zip her backpack, how her voice strained with practiced cheerfulness as she said she'd think about career day. Around noon, his intercom buzzed. Mr. Langston, there's a Miss S. Morgan here to see you. She says it's about Jade. Ethan's heart thudded. Send her in. The woman who stepped into his office looked to be in her early 60s. She had the same warm eyes as Jade, though they were clouded now with worry. On her hip, she carried a sleeping toddler, a boy with soft curls that looked achingly familiar. I'm sorry for coming like this, she said without preamble. But I didn't know what else to do. Miles still has a fever that won't break. And Jade, she needs to know. Who Ethan asked already, suspecting the answer. My grandson, the woman said gently. His name is Miles. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. She never told you, the woman added softly. He lowered himself into his chair as pieces began to align, Jade's quiet sorrow, the distant stares, the desperate phone calls. Why, he asked barely above a whisper. She needed this job, the woman said. The live-in position, the stability. But she knew most people wouldn't hire a single mother. She hesitated, especially not after what Ethan asked. After his father left, the woman said, voice tight. Left them with nothing but debt and broken promises. Jade's done everything she can to give Miles a better life, but being away from him, it's tearing her apart. He's sick. Mrs. Morgan said, her voice tight with emotion, and she's still trying to pretend she can hold it all together. Ethan stood abruptly. Where is she? In the kitchen. I think I saw her car in the driveway. Stay here, he said, already moving. He found Jade at the counter slicing vegetables with the kind of focus that came from desperation, not peace. When she looked up and saw his face, she froze. "You know," she whispered. "Your mother's in my office," he said gently. "With Miles." The knife slipped from her hand and clattered to the counter. "No." Her knees buckled slightly. No, he's sick." Ethan moved toward her, but she broke first, folding in on herself as a sob tore loose from her throat. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I never wanted to lie. I needed this job. I needed to give him something better. But I couldn't stay away from him, and then Clara needed me, and... you." Her voice cracked as she buried her face in her hands. "I'll go. Just please make it stop." Ethan reached her in 3 strides, gently, taking her hands from her face. "Jade," he said, voice low but sure. "Look at me." Her eyes, red and brimming, met his. The pain there nearly knocked the breath from him. "I don't care that you have a son," he said, fierce now. "What I care about is that you've carried this alone, that you thought I wasn't someone you could trust. How can you say that?" She whispered. "I lied. I crossed every line. You're not just anything." Ethan interrupted. His hands rose to frame her face, brushing away the tears with the tenderness of someone who had once forgotten how. "You're the woman who brought Clara's joy back, who turned this house into a home again, who makes me want things I'd stopped allowing myself to want." Jade's breath caught. "Let me help," he murmured. "Let me be there for you. For him." For a moment she said nothing, just searched his face looking for the cracks that might betray insincerity. But there were none. Finally, she nodded, voice barely audible. "I need to see my son. Then let's go together." He reached for her hand, and she didn't hesitate. They walked side by side through the quiet hallway toward his office, toward truth, toward whatever came next. Neither of them knew what it would look like, but for the first time, it wouldn't be faced alone. Behind them, the kitchen stood still, silent witness to the moment another wall had fallen, and above them, from a window pane, Clara's paper cranes danced gently in the breeze, counting not just the days, but the wishes. That night, the guest room changed completely. Ethan's staff moved quickly, transforming it into a space fit for a little boy, a toddler bed with rocket ship sheets, a nightlight that cast stars across the ceiling, a sound machine whispered waves against an invisible shore. In the corner, a rocking chair waited ready for sleepless nights and whispered lullabies. Jade stood in the doorway, one hand covering her mouth, the other holding Miles close against her chest. His fever had finally broken, and yet she couldn't let go. 2 months without him had felt like a lifetime. "Is it too much?" Ethan asked, his voice soft behind her. "I can change anything." She shook her head, slowly, eyes never leaving the room. This wasn't just a space. It was understanding a place where her 2 worlds could finally meet without fear. "You didn't have to do all this?" she whispered. "Yes," he said simply. "I did." His voice was firm but gentle. "This is your home now. Both of you, home." The word settled in her chest, filling empty spaces she hadn't known existed, but doubt crept in as persistent as a shadow. "What about your board members, your social circles?" She hesitated, the weight of her own fears pressing down. "Having your housekeeper's child, his illegitimate child, living here." "Stop." Ethan moved to stand in front of her, his expression intense. "First, you're more than just a housekeeper. You're family." He reached out gently, brushing his fingers through Miles's soft curls. "And second, this little boy is not illegitimate. He's a child who deserves love and stability just like Clara." At the sound of her name, Clara appeared at the door, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. She had been unusually quiet since meeting Miles, and Naomi felt a wave of worry rise in her chest. "Can I come in?" Clara asked hesitantly. "Of course," sweetheart. Naomi knelt down, still holding Miles. Would you like to see his room? Clara stepped in, her eyes wide as she took in the space. It looks like outer space, she said softly. Just like your astronomy books, Naomi replied with a smile. Your dad thought Miles might like stars as much as you do. Lily moved closer, peering at the sleeping toddler. Is he going to be my brother now? The question hung in the air, full of weight and possibilities. Naomi looked up at Ethan, panic flitting through her chest. How were they supposed to explain this complicated situation to a 6-year-old? But Ethan, as always, seemed to know exactly what to say. He knelt down beside them, creating a small bubble of intimacy. What do you think about that idea? He asked gently. Lily chewed her lip thoughtfully. Would he want to look at my telescope with me? And would he like my paper cranes? She hesitated before adding, would Miss Naomi still have time to make cookies with me? Oh, honey. Naomi reached out with her free arm, pulling Lily close. I will always have time for you. Always. I promise. Lily's voice was soft as she repeated, I promise. This time, Naomi made the vow without hesitation, without the weight of fear. You know what? Naomi continued, smiling. Miles loves cookies too. Maybe we can all make them together. Lily's face lit up. Can we make some now for when he wakes up? Ethan chuckled. It's almost bedtime, princess. But maybe tomorrow? Naomi's face brightened as an idea formed. What if we all had breakfast together tomorrow morning? I could make those special pancakes. You like? Lily bounced excitedly, then caught herself glancing at the sleeping Miles. Sorry, she whispered. It's okay. Naomi smiled softly. He sleeps like a rock, just like his mama, like you did during the thunderstorm. Ethan teased, his eyes twinkling. I distinctly remember someone jumping at every lightning flash. I was not jumping, Naomi protested, though her smile betrayed her. I was being vigilant, she added, laughing softly. Very vigilant. He agreed, nodding solemnly. Then, without a word, he reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Just as the moment settled between them, Miles stirred, his little face scrunching up as he woke. He blinked owlishly at the unfamiliar room before his gaze fell on Lily. Hi, he said shyly, burying his face into Naomi's neck. Hi, Lily replied, equally shy. Then, gathering her courage, she held out her elephant. This is Mr. Trunks, she said, her voice soft. He's really good at making people feel better when they're sick. Miles peeked out from Naomi's neck, his curiosity sparked. Is he magic? He asked in a whisper, his big eyes wide with innocence. Naomi's heart swelled as she looked at the two children, so different, yet so alike in their innocence and their need for love. She didn't have the answers to all their questions, but right now, in this moment, she didn't need to. They would figure it out together. And for the first time in a long while, Naomi allowed herself to believe in a future where the pieces could finally fall into place. Really? Lily asked, her voice tinged with awe. Uh-huh, Miles replied with a grin. He has magic in his trunk. Want to see, Naomi? Felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes as she watched Lily gently squeeze Mr. Trunks's trunk. The elephant's ears wiggled and Miles's delighted giggle echoed around the room. In that simple, joyful moment, a connection blossomed, fragile but real. Mama Miles asked, pointing at the rocket ship bed across the room. Stars. That's your new bed, baby. Naomi smiled softly. Do you like it? She asked. Miles nodded enthusiastically. Like Lily's book. You saw my astronomy book. Lily asked, surprised. He loves the pictures. Naomi explained. When I would video chat with him, he always wanted me to show him the pages about Saturn. That's my favorite planet, Lily exclaimed. Daddy, can I get my book to show Miles? She asked already, rushing to grab it. Ethan glanced at his watch, smiling softly. 1 chapter. Then bedtime for everyone. Deal. Lily called over her shoulder as she ran to fetch her book. Once she was gone, Naomi spoke softly, her voice full of warmth. "You're amazing with them." Ethan's tone matched hers, equally gentle. "Most men would be overwhelmed by all this. Most men haven't had you showing them what real strength looks like." He said, his voice full of admiration. Naomi's heart swelled. "Besides, look at them. How could anyone not want this?" Just then, Lily returned with her book in hand. They all gathered together in the rocking chair, managing to fit somehow, despite the chair being made for just one person. Lily sat perched on Ethan's knee, and Miles curled up on Naomi's lap. The book lay spread across all of them as Lily read aloud, pointing to each word with care. "Saturn's rings are made of ice and rock." Lily read, her voice soft but clear. "They stretch as wide as—" Naomi let the words wash over her, breathing in the scene around her, her son healthy and happy in her arms, his tiny body warm against her. Lily proudly sharing her knowledge, her face aglow with purpose, and Ethan solid and warm beside her, his arms stretched along the back of the chair, fingers occasionally brushing her shoulder. It wasn't perfect. There would be questions, adjustments, and challenges. The world outside might never fully understand or accept their unconventional family. But as Miles's weight grew heavier in her arms and Lily's voice slowed, growing sleepier, Naomi realized something that warmed her heart. Perfect wasn't what they needed. They just needed each other. "I think it's bedtime," Ethan whispered, as both children's eyes began to flutter. Together they tucked Lily into her bed just down the hall. Then they returned to Miles's new room, the quiet hum of the night wrapping around them like a soft blanket. The little boy, exhausted from both illness and the excitement of the day, fell asleep easily in his new bed. Naomi stood in the doorway watching the star patterns dance across the ceiling when she felt Ethan's presence behind her. "Stay," he said quietly. "Not as the housekeeper, not as an employee. Stay because we want you here. Both of you." She turned to face him, finding nothing but sincerity in his eyes. "Are you sure? This changes everything?" "Everything already changed the moment you walked into our lives," he said, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "We just didn't know it yet." In the soft glow of the nightlight, surrounded by the gentle sound of the ocean waves and the quiet breathing of her son, Naomi made her choice. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against Ethan's chest, and felt his arms come around her, pulling her closer. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll stay." Above them, Clara's paper cranes watched over their growing family, silently counting down to wishes already beginning to come true. Ethan adjusted his bow tie with practiced precision, his gaze scanning the room. This was his world, a world of handshakes that sealed million-dollar deals where power was as fluid as champagne in crystal flutes, but tonight felt different. Mr. Bennett came, the familiar voice of Charles Thornton, chairman of the board, who approached with his wife in tow. "We missed you at the last 2 dinner parties. Been busy with domestic matters, I hear." He added his pause just long enough to make the point clear. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. News traveled fast in their circles, and the sight of Naomi and Miles at the private school drop-off had fueled plenty of gossip. "Very busy," Ethan replied smoothly, flashing a practiced smile, "and very happy, Mrs." Thornton's lips curved into a smile that was almost too practiced, like she was rehearsing it for an audience. "It's so charitable of you," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "taking in your housekeeper's child. Though some might question the appropriateness. Some might question a lot of things." Eleanor Ethan cut in, his voice calm but firm, like why the Thornton Foundation's overseas investments don't match their reported charitable giving. The couple's smiles froze, but before either could respond, Ethan excused himself, watching them move away with discomfort visible in their stiff movements. Left alone, he stared down at his untouched champagne. His phone buzzed with a text from Naomi, the attached photo making his chest tighten with warmth. Lily and Miles were curled up on the library sofa, surrounded by books, both fast asleep. The caption read, "Our little astronomers crashed after their third reading of the solar system." Something inside him loosened. He was typing a response when a new voice interrupted his moment of peace. "They're calling her your live-in mistress, you know." Ethan looked up to find Rachel, Sophia's sister, watching him with concern. Rachel had always been the only one from Sophia's side of the family who kept in regular contact with him after the loss. "Hello, Rachel." She touched his arm gently, her eyes full of unspoken words. "I'm not judging. God knows Sophia would have wanted you and Lily to be happy. But people are talking." "Let them talk," Ethan said firmly, brushing off the weight of her words. "It's not that simple," Rachel murmured, glancing around before lowering her voice. "The board members, the investors, the traditional old money, they see you moving your housekeeper and her illegitimate child into your home, and they wonder about your judgment." "My judgment?" Ethan felt the anger rise in his chest. "My judgment is that 2 children deserve love and stability. My judgment is that Naomi Brooks has brought more joy into our lives in a few months than we've had in years, and your feelings for her." Rachel asked softly, an edge of skepticism in her tone. Ethan met her gaze steady and unwavering. "My feelings for her have everything to do with it." Rachel studied him for a long moment, before sighing, her expression softening. "You always were stubborn," she said with a small smile. "Just be careful. Not everyone will understand." As if to prove her point, whispers followed Ethan throughout the evening. Fragments of conversations drifted past him, sidelong glances and raised eyebrows all underscored the tension in the air. By the time he made his excuses and left, his shoulders were tight with frustration. The drive home through the quieter neighborhoods of Atlanta was a welcome escape. He passed houses where normal families lived their lives without judgment, without the eyes of the world constantly on them, but as he pulled up to his own gates, something inside him stirred. He didn't regret any of his choices. The mansion was mostly dark, but warm light spilled from the kitchen windows. When Ethan stepped inside, he found Naomi there wearing yoga pants and one of his old Harvard t-shirts, making hot chocolate. "The kids finally went down?" he asked, loosening his bow tie, a smile tugging at his lips as he watched her. Naomi turned to him, the sight of her so effortlessly comfortable at home, beautiful without even trying, made his heart skip a beat. After 3 bedtime stories, 2 cups of milk, and the gentle sounds of a lullaby, she looked like she had found a kind of peace. "After 3 bedtime stories and 2 songs, they're finally asleep," she said, with a tired but satisfied smile. Ethan moved toward her, his heart lighter than it had felt all evening. In this quiet moment, surrounded by the warmth of their home, nothing else seemed to matter. Naomi handed him a mug, and they each took a sip of water. She smiled at him, but when she saw the tension in his eyes, she couldn't help but ask, "That bad, huh?" "Nothing I can't handle," he replied, moving closer, accepting the mug she offered, "though apparently you're my live-in mistress now." Naomi's hand trembled slightly as she set down her own mug. "Ethan, if this is too much, don't—" He placed his mug down and pulled her close, his voice steady. "Don't let them make you doubt this, your reputation, your business. Those can survive a few whispers, but what they can't survive is losing you. Losing either of you." She leaned into his touch, but there was still worry in her eyes. He saw it clear as day. "I heard Lily's teacher asking her questions today about our living arrangement." Naomi said, her voice tinged with frustration. "She looked at me like I was taking advantage, using my son to trap you or something equally horrible." Naomi pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself as if to shield herself from the weight of the world. "Maybe we should move back to the garage apartment," she said quietly. "Keep some distance, at least in public." "No." Ethan's voice was firm, unwavering. "We're not hiding. We're not ashamed." He stepped closer to her, unwilling to let her retreat into herself. "But do you know what Lily told her teacher?" He smiled softly, his gaze softening with pride. She told her that her family was special because it had double the love. That's how our daughter sees us. Naomi. That's what matters. Tears welled in her eyes. Our daughter Ethan reached up, wiping away the tear that escaped. Yes. Our daughter. Our son. Our family. The rest of the world can adjust or not. I don't care. A soft sound from the doorway interrupted them, and they both turned. There stood Lily in her unicorn pajamas, holding Miles's hand. The little boy was clutching Mr. Trunks tightly, his eyes sleepy. Bad dream. Lily explained softly. Miles wanted his mama, and I said I'd help him find you. Naomi's heart softened instantly. She moved to scoop Miles up, but Ethan gently caught her arm. Hey kids, he said softly. How about some hot chocolate and a story in the family room? Just this once. Lily's face lit up. Can we make a fort? I don't see why not. Ethan replied, already removing his suit jacket. Naomi looked at him, still in his formal wear, ready to build blanket forts and drink hot chocolate at midnight, and in that moment, love surged through her chest. For time it is, she agreed, lifting Miles into her arms. But first, group hug. They came together naturally, each of them fitting perfectly into the other's arms. Miles's sleepy weight, Lily's excited bouncing, and Ethan's solid grounding presence. It felt right, more right than anything else ever had. Later they all curled up together in the makeshift fort, the children drifting off between them. The dim glow of a nearby lamp illuminated the cozy cocoon they'd created. Ethan caught Naomi's hand in the soft light. This is worth fighting for, he whispered, his voice filled with quiet determination. She squeezed his hand, the weight of the world still heavy in her thoughts. Whispers, judgments, disapproving glances. But looking at their sleeping children, at the man who had opened his heart to her son, she knew her answer. Yes, she whispered back, it is above them. Through a gap in the blankets, they could see Lily's paper cranes hanging from the ceiling. 312 now, each one a step closer to their 1,000-crane wish. Naomi's eyes lingered on them, the quiet flutter of the paper serving as a soft reminder of their hopes. But as she looked down at the peaceful faces of her children, the warmth of Ethan beside her, Naomi couldn't help but wonder some wishes perhaps didn't need 1,000 cranes to come true. They just needed courage, love, and the strength to face the world together. The next day, a letter arrived on expensive cream-colored stationery, hand-delivered to Ethan's office. The return address was from one of Atlanta's most prestigious law firms, but it was the name at the bottom that made his blood run cold. William Grayson. Sophia's father. Ethan's assistant lingered at the doorway. Mrs. Morgan is on line 1. Something about Clara's career day presentation. Ethan glanced at his watch. Right today was the day Jade would speak to Clara's class. They had spent weeks planning it together, turning their unusual story into something a room full of first graders could understand. Family love belonging. Tell her I'll call back in 5 minutes, he said, then closed his office door. Alone, he unfolded the letter that had arrived that morning. His eyes scanned the printed words, and slowly his grip on the page tightened until his knuckles turned white. Across town, Jade stood before 20 curious faces, her voice steady, despite the anxious flutter in her chest. Clara, seated front and center in her favorite yellow dress, beamed with pride. Being a homemaker, Jade began, isn't just about chores. It's about creating a space where people feel safe, where they can grow and be themselves. She held up photos of their backyard garden, flower-covered science experiments, the paper cranes that now hung from the living room ceiling. Clara chimed in, bright-eyed. We're making 1,000 paper cranes. That's right. Jade smiled, warmth in her voice. And what happens when we finish, sweetie? We get to make a wish. Clara announced. Jade opened her mouth to speak, but the classroom door creaked open. Ethan stood there, tension carved into every line of his face. Jade, he said quietly, we need to go now. But Daddy, Miss Jade's not done. It's an emergency. Something in his voice made Jade's breath catch. She quickly offered the teacher a brief thank you, gathered her things, and followed Ethan out. Behind them, a rustle of whispers began to stir. In the car, Ethan said nothing. He handed her the letter instead. As she read, her hands began to shake. "He's suing for custody," she whispered. "Of Clara." On what grounds? Her voice cracked. "Moral turpitude." Ethan answered, his jaw tight. "Unfit environment. Claims I allowed my employee." He nearly spat the word to replace Clara's mother. Jade's eyes filled with tears. "This is my fault. I shouldn't have moved in. I got too close to her." "Stop." Ethan's voice cut through her spiral. He pulled into the driveway and turned to her. "This isn't your fault. William never approved of me. Even when Sophia was alive, he thought she married beneath her because I built my fortune instead of inheriting it." He took her hand in his. "This is about control, about rewriting the ending to a story he never liked." "But he's powerful, Ethan. He knows people judges the press. What if he wins?" "I'm powerful too," Ethan said quietly. "And more importantly, I have something he never will, a family worth protecting." Inside the house, laughter drifted from the kitchen. Clara and Miles were decorating cookies with Mrs. Morgan, their faces dusted with flour and joy. "Look what we made." Miles held up a slightly smushed cookie. "It's Saturn. More like Jupiter." Clara teased gently. "Saturn has rings, remember?" Jade watched them, her heart aching at how natural it all felt. How peaceful, how fragile. How could anyone want to break this apart? Ethan's voice pulled her back. "We need to talk," he said to Mrs. Morgan, who nodded and took the children upstairs. Once the kitchen was empty, Ethan pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my legal team. We're fighting this." But Jade touched his arm gently, her eyes clouded with fear. "Maybe," she whispered, "maybe we give him what he wants." Ethan froze. "What are you saying? If I moved out, if I stepped away, maybe it would stop. Maybe he'd back off if I wasn't here." The silence that followed was heavy, impossible. Jade looked at him, eyes filled with grief. "I don't care what they say about me, but I can't let him take her, Ethan." No, Ethan's voice was quiet, but unyielding, steel wrapped in velvet. "Running won't solve anything," he continued. "It'll only prove him right. Make it look like we're hiding something." Jade's eyes shimmered with worry. "But what if he digs into my past, into Miles's father?" "What if I don't care about your past?" Ethan said, pulling her into his arms. "I care about our future. All of us together." Footsteps in the hallway made them turn. Clara stood there, her latest paper crane clutched tightly in her small hand. "Are we in trouble?" she asked in a timid voice. "Is it because of career day?" "No, baby." Jade knelt down, her voice soft but steady. "Why would you think that?" "Because Tommy's mom said, you shouldn't be there." Clara replied, her voice even smaller. "She said you're not my real mom, that it's wrong to pretend." The words hit Jade like a slap. For a moment she couldn't breathe, but before she could speak, Ethan dropped to one knee beside them. "Do you remember what Mommy used to say about family?" he asked gently. Clara nodded, eyes wide. "That it's made of love, not just blood." "Exactly," he said, smiling. "And our family has so much love, doesn't it? You and me, Miss Jade, Miles and Mr. Trunks," Clara added seriously, holding her stuffed elephant close. Ethan chuckled. "And of course, Mr. Trunks. Some people might not understand our family," he continued, "but that doesn't make it any less real." Clara held up her crane. "Tommy says they're just paper, but I know they're magic because they're made with love." Jade couldn't hold back the tears. She pulled Clara into her arms, her voice trembling. "That's right, sweetheart. Love is the strongest magic." Upstairs they could hear Miles's cheerful voice singing his ABCs with Mrs. Morgan afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching hundreds of paper cranes that now danced gently from every corner of their home, each one folded with care, each one a quiet declaration of hope. Ethan's phone buzzed. His lawyers ready for battle. But for now, he stayed still, holding them close, memorizing the feel of their togetherness. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we face it as a family." Jade nodded against his shoulder, one arm around Clara, her hand reaching instinctively for his. They had built something here, not perfect, but real, fragile and powerful, worth protecting. If Sophia's father wanted a fight, he would come to know what real loyalty looked like. Because the magic in this home didn't come from legacy or bloodlines, it came from bedtime stories and shared cookies, from whispered wishes and stubborn daily love. Clara mumbled something into Jade's dress. "What's that, sweetheart?" Jade asked gently. 547, Clara said sleepily. "That's how many cranes we have now. We're more than halfway to our wish." Ethan and Jade exchanged a glance over her head, a silent understanding passing between them. Maybe they didn't need to wait for 1,000. Maybe the wish was already unfolding, not in the granting but in the making, in each choice to stay, to love, to fight. Then came the sound they all felt in their bones, the doorbell. They turned toward the front window, and there it was, sleek, silver, and unmistakable. William Grayson's Bentley. Ethan stood straightening his tie. "I'll handle this." No, Jade stood beside him, shoulders squared. "We'll handle it. As a family." Clara slipped her hand into Jade's, her grip firm. "Can I show Grandpa my cranes? Maybe if he sees how pretty they are, he'll understand about magic." Jade's voice wavered as she brushed Clara's hair back. "Oh, sweetheart, I hope so." Jade knelt down again, gently smoothing Clara's curls. Sometimes she whispered, "Grown-ups forget how to believe in magic, but that doesn't mean we stop believing, right?" "Right." Clara nodded, lifting her chin with quiet determination. "Because we're special. We have double the love." The doorbell rang again, louder this time, insistent. But inside the kitchen they stood surrounded by quiet proof of the life they'd built. The smell of freshly baked cookies, children's drawings taped to the fridge, and delicate paper cranes dancing in the afternoon light. They were stronger than any storm waiting outside, because love, real love, didn't bow to legal threats or whispered judgment. It stayed. It fought. And it created families from the most unexpected pieces. Sometimes it even made wishes come true. Long before the 1,000th crane took flight, William Grayson stood in the Langston mansion's living room like a man used to being obeyed. His bespoke suit and cold composure reeked of old money country clubs, silent judgments and threats disguised as polite conversation. "This doesn't need to be difficult, Ethan," he said, swirling a glass of scotch he'd poured himself without asking. "Send the help and her child back where they belong. Resume an appropriate lifestyle. I'll drop the custody suit. Clara can continue to see both of us." Jade stood frozen beside Ethan, her shoulders tight with tension, but Ethan's voice remained calm. "She has a name, William, and her son is part of this family now." "Family." William scoffed his laugh, sharp and dismissive. "You're living in sin with the maid, Ethan, exposing my granddaughter to God knows what kind of influence." Ethan's eyes darkened. "Sophia," he said softly, "would be grateful that Clara is loved and happy." Happy. William slammed his glass down, amber liquid sloshing over the rim. "She's confused. Ethan. Living in this circus. A proper young lady needs order, tradition. Not some cobbled-together mess of strangers pretending to be family." "We're not strangers," Jade said, then her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "We're the ones who make her breakfast. Help her with school. We know she still sleeps with her mom's old sweater when she's scared, and that she wants to be both an astronaut and a baker." William turned toward her, eyes cold. "You've overstepped, gotten ideas above your station." He sneered. Did you really think you could slide into my daughter's place? Use your child to lock down your position here. That's enough, Ethan said, stepping forward, but Jade gently caught his arm. No, she said. Let him speak. I want to hear exactly what he thinks of me. Of us. William's eyes narrowed. I think you're an opportunist, a clever woman who saw a lonely man and moved in like a shadow. You used his grief, his guilt. He took a step closer, but you forgot something. Clara has real family. A grandmother, cousins, a name to uphold. Jade didn't flinch, a legacy of what she asked quietly. Cold dinners and quiet judgment, of measuring love by bloodlines and bank accounts. His mouth opened in protest. No, she said, her voice rising clear and steady. How dare you? You come into our home and threaten to tear a little girl's world apart because your version of family doesn't have space for us. Then came the soft sound of footsteps on the stairs. All heads turned. Clara stood there in her astronomy print pajamas, one hand tightly holding. Mr. Trunk's Miles peeked from behind her, sleepy but alert. Why are you yelling at Miss Jade? Clara's voice cut through the room like a spark in dry air. Her small frame stood tall, fierce in her space-themed pajamas. She's my family too. William blinked, visibly thrown off by the directness in his granddaughter's gaze. Clara, darling, come here. We need to talk about some changes. No. Her chin lifted stubbornly. You're being mean. She crossed her arms. Mommy said mean people don't get cookies or hugs. Clara Ethan started gently, but she wasn't done, and Mommy also said love is like the stars. There's always room for more. That's why she got me my telescope so I could see how big the universe is. She turned toward her grandfather, her voice trembling just slightly but strong. You don't want me to have more love, Grandpa. You don't want me to be like the stars. Silence fell over the room. William stared at her, and something in his face began to shift. His edges softened the weight of her words, pushing past years of pride. Sophia said that he asked quietly, about the stars. Uh-huh. Clara nodded, and Miss Jade helps me find constellations now. She makes hot chocolate with marshmallow moons, and she never gets mad when I ask too many questions. Miles peeked shyly from behind Clara's legs. Stars are pretty, he whispered. Clara smiled, reaching back to pat his head gently. This is my brother now. He's little, but he knows all about Saturn's rings. Do you want to see our models? William's hands clenched at his sides. Clara, this isn't about, yes, it is. She grabbed Miles's hand and with the full force of 6-year-old resolve, tugged him forward. Come see our cranes too. Before anyone could react, she was already leading them into the study, where hundreds of paper cranes filled the air, a delicate rainbow of folded wings suspended from the ceiling. See, she said, pointing up proudly, each one is a wish for love, for happiness, for family. That's what Mommy would want, right? More wishes, more love. William stood motionless beneath the kaleidoscope of childhood dreams and quiet devotion, and for the first time in years, the carefully built mask of superiority cracked, revealing something raw and human underneath. Sophia loved origami. He said almost to himself, She used to fold tiny boats for you when you were a baby. I know, Clara said softly, tugging his sleeve. Miss Jade found pictures in Mommy's albums. She helped me make boats too. She pointed to a shelf, paper boats lined up beside photo frames. Sophia holding baby Clara, Ethan reading to her beneath a blanket fort, Naomi helping her frost cookies, Miles and Clara sitting side by side at the park. William picked up one of the frames. His hands, once steady from decades of boardroom control, now trembled slightly. You look happy, he murmured. I am happy. Grandpa, Clara said, we all are. Even when we're sad about Mommy, we can still be happy too. She glanced up at Naomi, who stood beside Ethan in the doorway, both watching quietly. Miss Jade says, love makes room for everything. Clara added. Ethan slipped an arm around Jade's waist, pulling her close. Out of the mouths of babes, he whispered. William set the photo down with deliberate care. His eyes lingered on the cranes overhead. These are very well made, he said at last. Miss Jade teaches us patience, Clara replied, standing taller, and precision. That's a big word, a very big word, William agreed, his voice rough. Your mother, she would have appreciated that, the patience part. She always said, I rushed things. Clara tilted her head. Then don't rush now. She smiled simple and pure. Stay for cookies. Watch the stars with us. See how nice our family is. William looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, he seemed to see not just Sophia's daughter, but a child blooming in her own way, in her own time, in a home built from resilience and real affection. I should go, he said finally, voice low. My lawyers will be expecting, call them. Ethan said softly, tell them to stand down, stay for dinner, meet your grandson. William looked up sharply, grandson. That's what families do. Jade added gently, they grow, they change, they make room for more love. For a long moment, William stood frozen, his pride and uncertainty warring behind his eyes. Then quietly Miles toddled over to him, holding up a slightly crumpled paper crane with two tiny hands. For you, he said solemnly. Magic. William accepted the fragile offering, his hands trembling slightly. Thank you, young man. His name's Miles. Clara chimed in proudly. He's really good at puzzles. Something in William's expression cracked. No, not broke, but softened like ice under spring sunlight, revealing the water beneath. Perhaps, he murmured, I could stay. Just for a little while. Clara lit up like the morning sun. I'll get Mr. Trunks. He loves meeting new family. She dashed off, pulling Miles with her. William looked after them, then turned slowly to Ethan and Jade. This doesn't mean I approve, he said stiffly. But Sophia used to tell me I judged too quickly, that I was too set in my ways. That's all we're asking for, Ethan replied calmly. A chance time to show you what we already know. That family, Jade added gently, is more than blood. It's love. It's choice. It's making room for magic even when it arrives in unexpected packages. Above them, paper cranes danced in the warm evening breeze from the open windows. Each one held a wish, a prayer, a step toward understanding. And if William Grayson's eyes turned misty as his grandchildren came rushing back in with cookies and stuffed elephants and stars in their eyes, well, perhaps that was a kind of magic too, the quiet kind, the healing kind, the kind that changes hearts, one paper crane at a time. 2 weeks later, after William Grayson's unexpected visit, a quiet transformation swept through the Langston home like spring air through open doors. The custody suit was officially dropped, accompanied by a formal apology, and at the country club whispers of scandal turned to hushed curiosity and then to gentle admiration. On a warm Sunday morning, the family gathered in the garden for a very special occasion. 998. Clara counted carefully, hanging another paper crane on the arbor. Only 2 more. The garden had been transformed into a scene of quiet celebration. Cranes of every color fluttered from tree branches like tiny messengers of hope. Tables draped in simple white linens stood beneath the trees, each one crowned with fresh flowers and a delicate paper crane at its center. Are you sure about this? Jade asked, for what felt like the 100th time, smoothing the soft fabric of her white sundress. Ethan reached for her hand, lifting it to his lips. I'm sure about us. The rest is just decoration. From across the lawn, William sat with Miles in his lap, patiently folding a small paper boat. Like this, Grandpa? Miles asked, eyes squinting with concentration. Perfect young man, William replied, and for once the title held no trace of irony. You have your mother's hands? Nearby. Mrs. Morgan wiped tears from her eyes as she placed fresh pastries on a serving table. Never thought I'd see the day, she whispered to Rachel, who was helping her place napkins. My baby girl engaged to a man like Ethan Love has its own kind of wisdom. Rachel smiled, watching Clara instruct the catering staff with the confidence of a tiny general. Sophia would have approved, you know. She always said Ethan deserved a second chance at happiness. The guest list was smaller than Atlanta society might have expected, just family and close friends who had stood by their side through every uncertain step. No board members wringing their hands over propriety. No socialites looking for gossip. Just people who understood that love doesn't follow rules. It writes its own. Daddy Clara called from the garden. Can we do the last 2 cranes now? Before everyone comes. Ethan checked his watch, smiling. We have time. Jade nodded, and together they gathered around the library table, now set in the sun-dappled garden beneath strings of cranes swaying in the breeze. Ethan, Jade, Clara, and Miles. Watching nearby were William and the grandmothers, once skeptics, now believers, a quiet, united front. The last ones should be special, Clara declared, one from me and Miles, and one from Daddy and Miss Jade. Almost Mommy Miles corrected softly, the word falling from his lips like something sacred. Jade's eyes welled with tears. That simple word, not forced, not rehearsed, felt like the deepest vow she'd ever been given. Together, they folded the final cranes. One pure white. One deep blue, the color of midnight skies and whispered wishes. As they added them to the display, 1,000 paper birds caught the morning light. The garden became a kaleidoscope of color and promise. Time to make our wish. Clara bounced excitedly, but Jade looked at her family, her voice soft and full. Don't we already have everything we wished for? Ethan squeezed her hand. Almost everything. He stepped forward, and the garden quieted. Even the birds seemed to hush, as if they too were listening. When Sophia died, Ethan began, his voice steady but full of feeling. I thought that kind of happiness was gone forever. I built walls around my heart, around Clara's life, thinking it would protect us. He glanced at Jade. But love doesn't work that way. It finds the cracks. It seeps in, and it makes flowers grow in the hardest places. He took both her hands. You and Miles didn't just walk into our lives, you transformed them. You showed us that family isn't about replacing what was lost. It's about growing something new, something just as beautiful. Jade's vision blurred with tears as Ethan slowly knelt before her. The ring he held shimmered in the sunlight. Small, elegant, radiant, Clara's paper cranes taught us about patience, about believing in magic. He continued. 1,000 careful folds, 1,000 moments of hope. But the real magic wasn't in finishing them. It was in the journey, in midnight cookies, in early morning stargazing, in healing, in choosing each other, home. Jade whispered the word, barely audible. Exactly, Ethan said, his smile full of light. So Jade, Morgan, surrounded by our family, our 1,000 paper wishes, and all the love that brought us here, will you marry me? Say yes, Clara Stage whispered, making the entire garden break into soft laughter through their tears. Jade nodded, her heart full. Yes, she breathed 1,000 times. Yes. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, applause rose around them, joyful, tearful, unrestrained. Clara and Miles rushed into their arms, giggling as they knocked them off balance in a joyful pile of limbs and laughter. William cleared his throat, his voice gruff as he clapped Ethan on the shoulder. His eyes were suspiciously bright. Well done, Ethan, he said. Sophia would be proud of all of us, Mrs. Morgan pulled Jade into a fierce hug. Your grandmother would have loved this baby girl. All these paper birds, all this joy. The morning melted into afternoon, filled with laughter and stories, hugs and toasts. The garden bloomed with more than flowers. It was filled with something rarer, a second chance, a new beginning, 1,000 folds of love. The blending of families, the healing of old wounds, the quiet, victorious triumph of love over judgment. Clara and Miles ran between the garden tables, beaming with pride. They told anyone who would listen about their paper cranes, about wishes and magic, about hearts that were as big as the whole universe. As the sun began its slow descent, casting golden light through the swaying origami birds. Ethan found Jade by the fountain, the same place where months before their journey had changed forever. She was watching the children, her engagement ring catching the last rays of daylight, glowing like a promise. Having second thoughts, he teased gently, brushing a loose curl from her cheek. "What do you wish for now?" Jade glanced around, at William teaching Miles how to fold a butterfly from patterned paper, at Mrs. Morgan and Rachel laughing as they traded family recipes, at Clara surrounded by younger cousins, pointing out constellations in the early evening sky, at the 1,000 cranes suspended above them, all guardians of their journey. Nothing. Jade said softly, "Everything I could wish for is right here." Ethan kissed her gentle and sure as their paper birds fluttered in the breeze above them, and in the twilight sky the first stars began to blink into view. Reminders, like Clara once said, that there is always room for more love, more family, more magic. The wedding took place at twilight in the same garden where it had all begun. The 1,000 paper cranes still danced overhead, now joined by strings of soft, twinkling lights, forming a ceiling of dreams above their closest friends and family. The Atlanta sky turned shades of lavender and gold, and as the first stars peeked through the dusk, it felt as though the heavens themselves had come to bless this moment. Clara and Miles led the processional. Clara scattered rose petals with precise elegance, whispering to her flower basket, "I did the math. This is the perfect amount." Miles followed, his small chest puffed out with pride, wearing a miniature version of Ethan's tuxedo and holding the rings like they were treasure. And then, the moment Ethan had waited for Jade appeared at the top of the garden path. Her dress was simple, timeless, glowing with the last blush of sunlight. Tiny white paper cranes, carefully folded by Clara, adorned her veil like a crown of wishes. But it was her smile, steady, luminous, full of quiet joy, that made Ethan forget to breathe. "Ready?" William Grayson asked beside her. It had surprised everyone when he offered to walk her down the aisle, but he'd only grumbled, "Every bride deserves a father figure to walk beside her," and no one had questioned it again. The ceremony was short, but woven with meaning. They had written their own vows, threads from their shared story, paper cranes, midnight cookies, the ache of grief, the light of healing. And how two broken families had become one whole luminous thing. Ethan's voice rang clear beneath the evening sky. "I promise to love you not just with my heart, but with my soul, to find magic in the everyday, to build dreams from paper and starlight, to be the kind of father our children deserve." Jade's voice trembled with emotion as she replied, "I promise to believe in wishes, to trust in second chances, to fill our home with laughter and light, to remember that family isn't about where we came from, but where we choose to go. Together." Then came a small voice from behind. "And we promise too," Clara announced proudly, pulling Miles forward. She stood between them, grinning. "We promise to be the best brother and sister ever, to always believe in magic and never ever stop making paper cranes." Laughter bubbled through the garden. The minister raised an amused brow. "Well, he said that's not part of the traditional ceremony, but I think in this case we can make an exception." As Ethan and Jade exchanged rings beneath the garden lights, the world seemed to pause. Above them, tiny bulbs sparkled like earthbound stars, mingling with the dancing paper cranes in a quiet symphony of light and shadow. The moment hung suspended in time, perfect, precious, eternal. "By the power vested in me," the minister declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. "You may kiss the bride." Their kiss was gentle, not just a promise, but the culmination of every folded hope, every healing moment, every whispered wish between two once fractured hearts. Around them, the paper cranes rustled in the breeze, bearing witness to a love that had defied convention and carved its own sacred path. The reception was a celebration of all they had become, not just as a couple, but as a family. Each table was dressed in soft whites and scattered petals. At the center, framed photos of their journey surrounded by delicate cranes, folded in shared joy and quiet resilience. The wedding cake, a tower of white and gold, was adorned with sugar-crafted cranes, mirroring the ones strung above each winged symbol, a testament to endurance and grace. From her seat near the garden's edge, Mrs. Morgan dabbed at her eyes, watching Miles attempt to teach William an elaborate handshake. "Look at him," she whispered to Rachel. "My grandson. Who would have thought he'd end up in a family like this?" Rachel smiled her eyes on Clara, who was using paper cranes to map out constellations for her young cousins under the twilight sky. "Love has its own wisdom," Rachel murmured. Sophia would have loved all of this. Later that night, as soft music filled the air, Ethan held Jade close during their first dance. The cranes above shimmered in the lamplight, casting constellations of moving shadow across their faces. "Happy," he murmured into her hair. Beyond words, she whispered. Then came the familiar chaos, Clara and Miles crashing into their moment, demanding to be part of the dance. With laughter and ease, Ethan swept Clara into his arms, while Jade scooped up Miles, and together they swayed beneath the stars, their shadows folding into one. "You know what this means?" Clara asked, eyes wide with excitement. "Now we get to make 1,000 more cranes for new wishes." Jade laughed. "What else could we possibly wish for, sweetheart?" Clara's face grew thoughtful. "Well, maybe a baby sister. One who likes astronomy and baking, like me." Ethan and Jade exchanged a look, surprised laughter, then something tender and unspoken. One miracle at a time. Princess Ethan replied, his voice warm, but the look he gave Jade held a quiet promise. The party flowed into the night, full of music and soft toasts, gentle embraces, and dancing laughter. Later, as quiet settled over the garden, Ethan and Jade found themselves alone by the fountain, where their journey had once taken a fateful turn. The cranes above them cast slow-moving shadows across the water dreams in flight. "Do you remember?" Ethan asked. "That first day I found you by the pool with Clara. How could I forget?" Jade smiled. "I thought I was going to be fired. Instead," he said softly, brushing her cheek, "you set my heart on fire. You showed me that love doesn't end with loss. It just changes shape. Like your paper cranes," she whispered, "becoming something new, something beautiful." Ethan nodded. "We all taught each other, didn't we, Clara, with her unwavering belief in magic, Miles with his open heart, even William, learning to let go of the past." From across the garden came the sound of children's laughter. Clara was teaching her cousins how to fold their first cranes while Miles offered serious critique on their technique. William and Mrs. Morgan sat nearby, once strangers, now co-keepers of a shared legacy, united by love and time. Our family. Ethan said in awe, "All of it. The pain and the joy. The past and the future. Folded together." Jade finished smiling, like paper cranes, each crease necessary, each fold bringing us closer to something magical. Above them, the real stars had emerged in full, 1,000,000 silent witnesses glowing in the night sky. And between them, nestled in the threads of light, paper birds danced gently in the breeze, still carrying wishes, even after they'd come true. The cranes shimmered in the golden light, their wings catching reflections from the strings of garden bulbs above, until it became impossible to tell where earthly magic ended and celestial wonder began, just as it should be. Jade smiled as she watched the light dance above them, the soft glow of home, the quiet hum of joy, Because love, real love, knows no boundaries. It stretches outward like the universe itself, infinite, luminous, ever-expanding, making room for every sorrow that shaped them, every hope that carried them, and every story yet to be written. Time to cut the cake. Clara called, running toward them, with Miles right behind her, and make new wishes. She added, breathless with excitement. Ethan pulled Jade close, pressed a kiss to her temple, and murmured, "What do you say, Mrs. Bennet, ready for 1,000 more wishes?" Jade looked around at their children, their family, their dreams, made real cranes overhead. Hearts healed a love that had stitched itself together with gentleness and grace. "With you," she whispered, "always and together." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the celebration. Above them, the paper cranes seemed to shimmer just a little brighter, as if smiling in silent agreement, as if to say that some wishes don't need magic to come true. They just need love and courage and hearts, big enough to hold all the stars in the sky. Based on the emotional depth of this story, here's a question to carry with you. If you were to fold 1,000 paper cranes and make one wish like Clara did, what would it be? Would you wish for a love like Ethan and Jade's, a healing like the one their family found, or the courage to face a challenge you've been quietly carrying? Each crane represents one small step toward your dream. Just like in our story, it's not only the wish that matters, it's the journey you take to get there, the person you become along the way, the hearts you open, the ones you help heal, including your own. Clara and her family learned this one fold at a time. What would your 1,000-crane journey teach you? And so, with every fold, every whispered wish, a family was born, not from perfection, but from patience, from forgiveness, from the kind of love that doesn't ask to be understood, only chosen again and again. They didn't need 1,000 cranes to find their magic, because the real magic was always in the journey, in the healing, the laughter, and the courage to believe in love after loss. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of someone you love, or made you believe even just a little in second chances and quiet miracles, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Shining Stories for more tales that speak not just to the ears, but to the soul. Thank you for being here. Until next time, keep folding, keep hoping, and keep loving.